What if every trade you ever placed was just a mirror, not of the market, but of your own psychology? Think about that for a second. You click buy, the candle flickers, your heart races, you're convinced you see an opportunity. And yet, statistics tell us over 90% of retail traders lose money. 9 out of 10. If our instincts were really so sharp, if our gut feelings were trustworthy, how could that number be so brutally one-sided? Here's the paradox. If most instincts in trading lead us to failure, maybe the secret to survival is to flip the script, to do the opposite, to step into the mirror and act against every fiber of your being. Welcome to Trading Psychology Stick, where we decode the hidden forces that control your trades. Quick disclaimer, what I'm about to share isn't financial advice. It's a psychological experiment I ran on myself. Your results will vary, your mind will resist, and that's exactly the point. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff with the wind howling against your face. Every nerve in your body tells you to step back, to cling to safety. But what if survival demanded the opposite, that you leap forward into the unknown? That's what trading feels like. Every candle, every spike, every dip presses on our primal instincts. And here's the brutal truth. Those instincts weren't designed for markets. They were designed for survival in the wild. When you feel fear seeing a red candle plunge, your brain is whispering, "Get out, danger ahead." When you feel excitement watching green bars stack higher, your brain cheers, "Chase it, there's food over there." But markets aren't jungles, and prey doesn't run in neat lines on a chart. This is why our instincts betray us. They aren't calibrated for modern trading. They are calibrated for running from tigers and finding berries. Actually, let me tell you something embarrassing. My worst trade ever happened because I saw a squirrel. True story. I was watching the charts, saw movement outside my window, looked at a squirrel for maybe 3 seconds, and when I turned back, my position had moved against me by 2%. My instinct said, "Hold, it'll come back." It didn't. That squirrel cost me $800. If that's not proof that our instincts are poorly wired for trading, I don't know what is. Psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky proved it decades ago. They showed how our minds fall into traps like loss aversion, where the pain of losing is twice as strong as the pleasure of winning. That's why you cut profits too soon, but hold losers too long. They revealed confirmation bias. Your brain hunts for reasons you're right instead of evidence you're wrong. That's why you ignore warning signs until it's too late. The paradox of trading instincts is cruel. The very signals that once kept our ancestors alive now lead modern traders straight into ruin. It's why over 90% lose money. It's why even smart, disciplined people repeat the same mistakes. PhD holders, engineers, doctors, all fall into the same psychological traps. That's the idea behind something I call the opposite trade drill. It isn't in the textbooks, you won't hear it in your broker's webinars, and Wall Street isn't teaching it in seminars. It's a radical experiment. You take the trade you desperately want to take, and then you reverse it. If your hand screams buy, you sell. If your voice whispers hold, you close. You stop being led by instinct, and instead, you confront it. When I first heard this, I thought it was madness, a gimmick, maybe even a cruel joke from a trader who'd lost too much and wanted company and misery. But then I tried it. And what happened was, like stepping into a hall of mirrors where every reflection showed a different version of myself, each one making the exact wrong move at the exact wrong time. In this video, I'm going to take you through my full journey, the awkward first attempts where I literally froze at my keyboard, the shocking wins that made no logical sense, the devastating emotional fallout that had me questioning everything, the experiments I ran with 20 documented trades, the insights that tore me open, and the breakthroughs that rewired how I trade forever. So, if you've ever stared at your screen and thought, "Why do I always do the wrong thing?" You're not alone. And you're about to see that the answer isn't just in the chart, it's in the reflection staring back at you. Chapter 2, Birth of the Opposite Drill. The first time I ever heard about flipping a trade, I laughed. Not a small chuckle, but a full belly laugh. How could doing the opposite of what you believed be anything more than self-sabotage? Trading is already hard enough. Why would anyone make it harder by deliberately going against their analysis? But then I remembered a story about Richard Dennis, the legendary commodities trader who turned $400 into hundreds of millions. Dennis once trained a group of complete beginners called the Turtle Traders and proved that strict discipline, not instincts, was the secret to success. They followed his rules blindly, no matter how absurd their gut told them those rules were, and many of them became millionaires. That story stuck with me. It whispered something uncomfortable. Instincts don't matter as much as we think. In fact, they often drag us down. Around the same time, I stumbled onto a small trading forum where someone casually mentioned an experiment they were running, taking the opposite side of their own signals. They weren't joking. They weren't mocking themselves. They were dead serious. The trader explained that his opposite trades were actually outperforming his real ones by about 15%, and he felt like he had stumbled on some kind of cruel cosmic joke. The idea lodged itself in my head like a splinter. It made me uneasy. I thought of every time I had rushed into a breakout that immediately reversed. Every time I cut a winner just before it exploded higher. Every time I doubled down on a loser that only sank deeper. What if, instead of resisting those moments, I turned them on their head? What if I used my own flaws as signals? I began to imagine the drill as a decoder. Each trade I wanted to take would reveal something about me, my fear, my greed, my impatience. And by taking the opposite, I would force myself to confront those flaws in real time. It wasn't about making money, at least not at first. It was about exposing the bias that had been invisible to me until now. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how powerful the idea could be. Kahneman's research had already shown that humans are systematically irrational. We don't just make random mistakes, we make predictable ones. If my mistakes were predictable, then maybe they could be measured. Maybe they could even be reversed. Maybe my consistent ability to lose money could be flipped into a consistent ability to make it. Here's where it gets interesting. I did the math. If I was wrong 70% of the time, which my trading journal brutally confirmed, then doing the opposite should make me right 70% of the time. Simple logic, right? Well, markets don't care about your logic, but I was desperate enough to try. I learned this the hard way. I thought I was rational. I had read books, studied strategies, even paper traded for months. But the first time I went live, everything collapsed. My rules vanished the moment my pulse spiked. I bought the top, sold the bottom, repeated the cycle until my account bled red. It felt personal, like the market had my IP address and was specifically hunting me down. But it wasn't the market. It was me. My instincts were the enemy. And once I saw that, I realized maybe the only way forward was to look straight into that uncomfortable truth. Not to escape my instincts, but to expose them. The opposite trade drill wasn't some reckless game. It was a deliberate experiment in rewiring instincts. It was a training tool, like a boxer shadowboxing against his own reflection, learning to spot weaknesses before stepping into the real fight. So, I made a decision. I would try it. I would put my own trading to the test by flipping every instinct I had. And I promised myself one thing. I would track it carefully, without excuses, without cherry-picking. I would let the truth tell me who I really was. What happened next shocked me, and I mean that literally. My hands were shaking. Chapter 3. The First Shock. The first time I actually executed the opposite trade drill, it felt like trying to write with the wrong hand while someone was yelling at me. My body resisted. My chest tightened. I hovered over the button for what felt like forever. The setup looked perfect to me. A clean breakout, volume rising, a chart pattern I had seen succeed dozens of times before. Every cell in my body screamed, "Buy now." But this time, I wasn't here to obey. I was here to confront myself. So, with my heart hammering, I clicked sell. The screen blinked, the order filled, and in that moment, I felt as if I had stepped through glass into a strange, distorted version of reality. My head spun. What had I just done? I felt reckless, foolish, even a little sick. I actually said out loud to my empty room, "This is the dumbest thing I've ever done." But then the market did something I didn't expect. The breakout failed. The price reversed sharply, and within minutes, my opposite trade was in profit. Not just a little profit, but more than I usually made in a good day. I remember staring at the screen, frozen. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel relieved. What I felt was pure disorientation. Because if my instincts had been so certain, if I had seen what I thought was a textbook breakout, how could the market have punished that certainty so quickly? And why had the wrong decision turned out to be right? That profit didn't feel good. It felt wrong, like I had cheated at a game but couldn't figure out what rule I'd broken. Have you ever won at something but felt like you lost? That's exactly what this was. Before we go deeper, pause this video for 10 seconds and ask yourself, What was your last impulsive trade? Not your last trade, but the last one where you acted on pure gut feeling. Got it in your mind? Good. Keep that trade as we continue, because you're about to see it in a completely different light. This wasn't an isolated event. The next day, another setup appeared. A dip I was eager to buy. Classic support bounce, oversold indicators, the works. My hand shook as I entered the opposite. A sell. Once again, the market continued falling, validating the trade I never wanted to make. The pattern repeated. Trade after trade, my instincts pointed one way and the market moved the other. It was like standing in front of a funhouse mirror where everything I believed was inverted. But along with the shock came something darker. Fear. If I couldn't trust my instincts, what could I trust? Every lesson I had studied, every chart pattern I had memorized, every backtest I had run, suddenly they felt flimsy, unreliable, even meaningless. The ground beneath me wobbled. Daniel Kahneman's words echoed in my mind. We are prone to overestimate how much we understand about the world and to underestimate the role of chance. That was me, overconfident, sure that my read of the market was solid, when in fact I was just another human mind tangled in bias and randomness. The first shock of the opposite trade drill wasn't just about profit or loss. It was about identity. Who was I as a trader if I couldn't trust myself? Could I really build a future in markets if my best ideas crumbled the moment they were tested in the decoder? I didn't have the answer yet. All I knew was that the drill had cracked something open inside me, and once the glass was broken, there was no going back. Chapter 4. Emotional Chaos. At first, the opposite trade drill felt like a strange trick that somehow worked. But after a handful of trades, the confusion began. Some of the opposite trades were winners, others were losers. The results were inconsistent, messy, unpredictable, just like the markets themselves. And that's when the chaos crept in. Picture this. I'm sitting in front of my screens late at night, charts glowing, coffee going cold beside me. I'd switched to tea earlier, but went back to coffee because apparently I need caffeine to make bad decisions properly. A setup appears. My analysis screams long. I force myself to short. This time, the market goes up without me, leaving me staring at a loss I deliberately invited. My chest tightened, my throat burned. Was I sabotaging myself on purpose? Or was I simply discovering that my instincts weren't always wrong, just often wrong? The drill was doing something I didn't expect. It was tearing me apart inside. It was as if two versions of me were wrestling for control. The instinctive trader, desperate to follow the gut, and the reflective trader, determined to use the decoder as a weapon. I felt split, fragmented, unsure which version was real. Every order felt like betrayal. Either I betrayed my gut by flipping the trade, or I betrayed the experiment by following my gut. There was no comfortable path. Here's something nobody tells you about questioning yourself. It bleeds into everything. I started second-guessing restaurant orders. Do I really want the pasta, or is that just my instinct? It sounds funny now, but at the time, it was maddening. There's a special kind of pain that comes when you can't trust yourself. It's not like losing a trade to bad luck, or missing an entry because you were distracted. It's deeper. It's the hollow ache of realizing that the voice inside your head, the one that's supposed to protect you, guide you, make sense of the chaos, might be your worst enemy. I remember one evening in particular. The setup was crystal clear. A bullish flag, volume tapering just as it should, breakout imminent. My gut whispered, "Buy it now, ride the wave." But the rules of the drill were merciless. I shorted. Within seconds, the market ripped higher, tearing through resistance, leaving my position bleeding red. I slammed the desk, rage boiling through me. And then something even worse set in. Shame. Shame that I had betrayed myself. Shame that I had played the clown in my own circus. That night, I stared at my reflection in the darkened monitor. My face looked older, harder. I wondered if this experiment was exposing truth or just destroying me. Every losing opposite trade felt like punishment, and every winning one felt like mockery, proof that I had been wrong all along. Either way, I was losing something: money, confidence, identity. You know what's crazy? My wife asked me during dinner, "How was trading today?" And I couldn't answer. How do you explain that you're deliberately losing money to learn something you're not even sure exists? She thought I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. The emotional fallout went beyond trading. I felt it in my bones, in conversations with friends, in the way I second-guessed simple decisions like what to eat, or where to drive. If I couldn't trust myself on the charts, how could I trust myself anywhere else? My world narrowed. Trading wasn't just numbers on a screen anymore. It was a lens reflecting back every doubt I had ever buried. That's when I realized the drill wasn't just about trades. It was about my identity. Who was I without my instincts? If I couldn't trust myself, what was left? I started pacing the room after trades, muttering under my breath, arguing with myself like a madman. One night, I remember slamming my fist on the desk and whispering, "I don't even know who I am anymore." The chaos wasn't just emotional. It showed up in the numbers too. Sometimes the opposite trade worked beautifully, and I felt like I had cracked some hidden code. Other times it failed spectacularly, and I felt like an idiot for not following my first analysis. I kept asking myself, was I just flipping a coin with extra steps? Or was I peeling back layers of my psychology, exposing patterns I'd never seen before? If you're watching this and thinking this sounds like torture, you're right. It was. But here's what I learned. Growth is supposed to hurt. If it doesn't challenge your core beliefs about yourself, you're not really growing. You're just rearranging furniture. Here's what I want you to do right now. Take a breath. A real one. Because if you're feeling uncomfortable watching this, if you're recognizing yourself in my struggle, that discomfort is the first sign you're ready for change. Comment below with one word that describes your biggest trading emotion. Just one word. Mine was desperate. Cognitive scientists call this dissonance, the unbearable tension when your beliefs and your actions clash. And that's exactly what the drill was designed to create. By forcing me to act against my natural impulse, it was breaking the harmony I'd built around my instincts. That harmony was comforting, but destructive. This disharmony was painful, but illuminating. But here's the paradox. That despair was the point. Psychologists talk about the dark night of the soul and transformation. Before growth, there is collapse. Before clarity, confusion. The drill was dragging me into that darkness, forcing me to confront the uncomfortable truth that I wasn't the rational, disciplined trader I pretended to be. I was a bundle of biases, impulses, and fears dressed up in strategy. And maybe that's what every trader needs at some point. A breakdown that strips away the illusion of control. Because only when you admit you're blind can you begin to see. I didn't know it yet, but the chaos was preparing me for the next phase. The decoder wasn't finished with me. It had shown me the cracks. Now it was going to measure them, scientifically, mercilessly. Chapter 5. The 20-Trade Experiment. After the emotional storm, I knew I couldn't keep wandering in the dark. I needed structure. So I set myself a challenge. 20 trades, all logged, all flipped. No excuses, no cherry picking, no hiding. Just the raw truth of the opposite trade drill measured against the numbers. I prepared like a scientist. Spreadsheet open, categories ready. Date, time, instrument, what my instinct said, what the drill forced me to do, result, and emotional reaction. It felt clinical at first, almost sterile. But inside, I was trembling. Because once the data was written down, there would be no more illusions. Numbers don't lie. They don't care about your feelings. They just sit there, staring at you with mathematical indifference. The first week was brutal. Trade after trade, my instincts pointed one way. The drill forced me the other. And I watched results unfold with a mixture of fascination and dread. Some were small losses, some surprising wins, some trades I wished I had never placed. By trade number 10, a strange clarity began to emerge. Patterns. Predictable, repeatable patterns. My natural trades weren't random mistakes. They were biased in consistent ways. When momentum looked strong and my gut screamed to chase, the market often reversed within 3 candles. When fear gnawed at me and told me to close early, the opposite trade captured moves I would have missed. It wasn't perfect, but it was undeniable. My instincts had a fingerprint, a rhythm, and the drill was exposing it. Let me give you the actual numbers, because they still blow my mind. Out of 20 trades, when I followed my instinct in simulation, I would have won 6. When I flipped them, I won 12. Not amazing, but literally double my natural success rate. That's not luck. That's data showing me I was consistently wrong in predictable ways. Around this time, I remembered a famous study by Barber and Odean from the year 1999. They tracked thousands of retail traders and discovered something shocking. The more they traded, the worse their returns. Overconfidence and overtrading bled accounts dry. That was me. My instincts weren't guiding me. They were luring me into overconfidence traps. And the drill, painful as it was pulling back the curtain. By trade number 15, the emotional chaos began to settle. I started to approach each entry with curiosity instead of fear. What will the decoder show me this time? I asked myself before clicking. It was no longer just about profit or loss. It was about observation, about discovery. The drill had shifted from torture to experiment. Fun fact, I had rules written down in a notebook I never opened. During the experiment, I actually taped them to my monitor. First time those rules saw daylight in months. The drill forced me to confront not just my psychology, but my laziness. And by the time I hit trade number 20, the verdict was clear. The opposite trade drill wasn't a money machine, but it was a truth machine. It revealed my impatience, my FOMO, my habit of cutting winners too soon. It exposed the hidden wiring beneath my decisions. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just reacting to the market. I was beginning to study myself with the same rigor I used to study charts. That realization changed everything, because once you see your flaws in data, you can't unsee them. The decoder doesn't let you go back to pretending. But the experiment was only the beginning. The truth machine had shown me patterns I had never noticed. Now it was about to magnify them so large, so undeniable, that they would force me to rethink not just my trades, but the way I thought about trading itself. Chapter 6, The Pattern Decoder. By the end of the 20-trade experiment, I sat in front of my spreadsheet like an archaeologist brushing dust off ancient bones. The numbers whispered secrets I had never heard before. My instincts, those impulses I once thought were sharp, had a rhythm, predictable, mechanical, almost comically obvious once it was mapped out. It was as if the market wasn't the opponent, my own psychology was. The first pattern leapt off the page, FOMO. Every time momentum built and I felt that irresistible tug to chase, the drill forced me to step back, or worse, to go against it. And time again, those perfect moments collapsed into reversals. My gut wasn't spotting opportunity, it was spotting traps. The decoder revealed that my fear of missing out was really just fear of being left behind, and that fear made me easy prey. Here's the embarrassing part. I calculated that FOMO cost me an average of 3% per trade. 3%. That means if I just sat on my hands during FOMO moments, I'd be up 30% more at the end of the year. Let that sink in. I noticed that my instinctive trades often involved cutting winners at the first sign of hesitation, like a nervous parent pulling their kid out of the pool the second they splash. But when I flipped the decision, holding instead of closing, the moves stretched further, the profits larger. The drill was screaming at me. My biggest enemy wasn't bad entries. It was my inability to stay in good trades. And then there was revenge trading. When I lost, my gut would lunge back into the market, desperate to reclaim what was gone. The opposite drill turned those vengeful urges into signals to step away, or even take the other side. The result? Fewer emotional spirals, fewer compounding mistakes. One revenge trade I flipped saved me from what would have been a $500 loss. Instead, I made $80. Not much, but compared to losing $500, that's a $580 swing. But it went deeper than just trading behaviors. The drill became an X-ray, revealing the psychological forces beneath the patterns. Loss aversion was the first fracture line that glowed. Kahneman and Tversky proved that the pain of losing is about twice as powerful as the pleasure of winning. And there it was, alive in my trades. When I lost, I couldn't let go. I held too long, refusing to accept reality, like holding onto a hot coal hoping it would turn to gold. When I won, I let go too quickly, terrified the profit might vanish. My instincts weren't guiding me. They were protecting me from pain at the cost of progress. Then came the bias of overconfidence. I had always thought of myself as cautious, analytical, maybe even a little skeptical. But the drill showed me otherwise. Every time I flipped my instinct and it worked, I realized how certain I had been in the wrong direction. My confidence wasn't a shield, it was a blindfold. I wasn't cautious, I was convinced of illusions. Here's a funny thing. I once spent 45 minutes analyzing a trade, complete with multiple time frames, 3 indicators, and even checking the news. I was absolutely certain. The drill said, go opposite. I did. The trade I wanted to take lost spectacularly. All that analysis was just me hunting for confirmation of what I already wanted to believe. The X-ray also highlighted confirmation bias, the way I hunted for reasons to justify the trades I wanted to take, charts, indicators, tweets from gurus. If they supported my instinct, I clung to them. If they didn't, I dismissed them. The drill forced me to act against that comfort, and suddenly I saw how fragile my analysis really was. I wasn't researching, I was rationalizing. But the most painful revelation was this. Every one of these biases came from the same root. Fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear of missing out. Fear of letting go. The opposite trade drill wasn't just messing with my entries and exits. It was unmasking the emotional DNA of my trading life. Before we continue, I want you to pause and think. What pattern do you suspect you have? Don't overthink it. First thought. Is it FOMO, early exits, revenge trading, or something else entirely? Drop it in the comments. I guarantee you're not alone in whatever pattern plagues you. It was dizzying. For years I had blamed the market for being unpredictable, cruel, even manipulative. The market makers are hunting my stops, I used to say. But the decoder was showing me something far more unsettling. The market wasn't against me. I was against me. The candles didn't care whether I won or lost. The bias was inside my head, and the drill had dragged it into the light. I thought of Daniel Kahneman again, his words echoing like a warning. We can be blind to the obvious, and we are also blind to our blindness. That was me. I hadn't just missed the patterns. I hadn't even realized they existed. The drill wasn't teaching me to predict the market. It was teaching me to predict myself. And here's the twist. Once you can predict yourself, you can defend against yourself. The decoder gave me something no strategy book ever had. A way to see my own fingerprints on every mistake. And once I saw them, I couldn't pretend anymore. And yet, in that exposure, something powerful began to shift. For the first time, I started to detach. I stopped seeing trades as proof of my worth and began seeing them as experiments, data points, signals in a system larger than me. I wasn't battling the market anymore. I was studying myself. That shift changed the way I looked at the screen. Every urge, every twitch of instinct became a clue, not a command. The drill transformed my mistakes from curses into teachers. It didn't make the pain of loss vanish. It made the pain meaningful. Still, this wasn't the end of the journey, because knowing your flaws isn't enough. You have to change them, and that meant learning to let go completely. There comes a point in every trader's life when the market strips you bare. For me, that moment arrived on a stormy Thursday afternoon. The sky outside was heavy with rain, and my trading screen mirrored the turbulence inside me. A setup appeared, a perfect one, at least in my eyes. A bullish reversal, momentum curling upward, every instinct screaming, "This is the one. Get in. Don't miss it." But the rules of the opposite trade drill demanded the opposite. My hand hovered over the button, sweat gathered on my palms. My stomach clenched as if preparing for a punch. I actually started talking to myself. This is stupid. This setup is perfect. Why am I doing this to myself? And then, with a sharp exhale, I did it. I went short. Within minutes, the market unraveled. The bullish reversal failed like a house of cards in wind. Price collapsed through support, slicing downward like a blade through silk. My wrong trade was suddenly right. Not just right, it was life-saving. What I thought was opportunity had been a trap, and by letting go of my instinct, I had dodged disaster. I pushed back from the desk, my body trembling. The shock wasn't in the profit flashing on my screen. It was in the realization that letting go of being right had saved me. My ego had been begging for validation. My gut had been desperate to prove itself. But the decoder showed me freedom. The moment I stopped needing to be right, I started surviving. It felt like falling backward into water. At first terrifying, then strangely peaceful. I had spent so long clinging to the illusion of control, believing that every trade was a referendum on my intelligence, my skill, my worth. And now, for the first time, I let go. I let the market be the market, my instincts be flawed, and the drill be the guide. You want to know something strange? That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because I made money, but because I finally stopped fighting myself. The war inside my head called a temporary ceasefire. That moment didn't just change how I traded, it changed how I lived. Because trading is never just about charts. It's about psychology, identity, ego. And in learning to let go of my need to be right, I caught a glimpse of something I'd been missing: humility. The kind that doesn't weaken you, but sharpens you. The kind that frees you from chasing ghosts. I realized then that the opposite trade drill wasn't about building a system I could use forever. It was about breaking chains. Chains of bias, of fear, of ego. And the more I let go, the lighter I became. But the drill still had more to teach me, because letting go is one thing. Rewiring your instincts, that's another beast entirely. And that was the next frontier. Chapter 8. Rewiring the brain. Training your instincts is like training a wild animal. At first it resists, claws, bites, tries to break free. But with enough pressure, enough repetition, it begins to adapt. That's what the opposite trade drill became for me. Not just a decoder, not just an X-ray, but a rewiring device, forcing my brain to build new pathways where the old ones had betrayed me. One night, I saw it happen in real time. The market had been running hot all day, green candles stretching like skyscrapers across the chart. My gut itched to jump in, to grab hold of the rocket before it flew away. The FOMO was unbearable. My cursor hovered over buy. But then a strange calm set in, a voice I didn't recognize yet, but that felt truer than the frantic whisper of instinct said, "If you feel the urge, it's probably the trap." So I clicked sell. The screen blinked. Seconds later, the market stalled, then reversed. My short trade, the opposite of everything my body wanted to do, landed right. I leaned back, stunned, not by the profit, but by the shift. My brain had begun to anticipate its own flaw. The drill had etched a new groove in my thinking, a counter-instinct that finally served me instead of sabotaging me. It reminded me of martial arts training. In sparring, when an opponent throws a punch, your body's natural instinct is to flinch, to step back. But a fighter learns to slip forward, to move into the strike, to use the opponent's momentum against them. The opposite trade drill was doing the same thing, teaching me to respond not with the instinct of fear, but with the trained reflex of awareness. I started calling it the pause, that split second between impulse and action where I could ask, is this my bias talking? It became my superpower, not the ability to predict the market, but the ability to predict myself. And here's the wild part. The more I practiced, the less I needed to consciously flip trades. Slowly, my gut began to recalibrate. Urges that once screamed buy softened into whispers I could question. Desires that once shouted close now turned into signals to breathe, to wait, to hold. It was as if the wild animal in my head was finally learning to heal. But the process wasn't easy. There were setbacks, times when the old instincts surged back, when I followed them and paid the price. Like the time I saw a massive green candle and thought, this time is different. It wasn't. It never is. The market humbled me again, and the lesson stuck deeper. Yet each failure reinforced the lesson. The decoder never let me hide. The drill never let me forget. Little by little, the rewiring took hold. I wasn't just a trader reacting to candles anymore. I was becoming an observer of myself, someone who could stand between impulse and action, who could choose not to obey the first voice in my head. Here's what I want you to try right now, even if you never do the full drill. Next time you feel a strong urge to enter a trade, count to 10. Just 10 seconds. See what happens to that urge. Does it intensify, fade, change completely? That 10-second pause might save you more money than any indicator ever will. And that's when I began to see the true purpose of the drill. It was never about trading the opposite forever. It was about building the muscles to question, to wait, to detach. Because once your instincts are retrained, you no longer need the drill. And that moment was closer than I realized. The day would come when the decoder would vanish, not because it had failed me, but because it had already done its job. The day it happened, I almost didn't notice. I was so used to the ritual, the urge to act, the flip into the opposite, the waiting game that followed, that when I sat down to trade that morning, I was already prepared for the drill. But something was different. The chart lit up with what looked like a perfect long setup. Clean support bounce, volume building. My instinct twitched, ready to scream buy. Only this time, it didn't. Instead, I caught myself analyzing with a strange clarity. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't gripping the mouse with sweaty palms. I wasn't bargaining with myself. The voice inside, the one that used to roar and shove me toward reckless entries, had quieted to a whisper. I could hear it, but it no longer controlled me. I entered the trade, not opposite, not forced, just aligned. And for the first time in months, it wasn't the drill that guided me. It was me, the real me, not the impulsive me, not the fearful me, but the aware me. That's when I realized the decoder had done its work. It no longer needed to reflect my flaws back at me, because I could see them on my own. I had internalized the lessons. The drill had been training wheels, and suddenly, without warning, they fell away. It's hard to describe that feeling, like finally being fluent in a language you've been stumbling through. The words just come. The trades just made sense. Not because the market had changed, but because I had. It reminded me of something I once read about meditation. At first, you use the breath as an anchor, constantly returning to it whenever your mind wanders. But eventually, the awareness becomes natural. You no longer need the breath as a crutch. You are simply aware. The opposite trade drill was my anchor. And now I had crossed the threshold into awareness. But with that realization came a mix of emotions. Relief, yes. Pride, a little. But also fear. If I no longer needed the drill, did that mean I could slip back into old habits? Could my instincts, those sly tricksters, creep back in when I wasn't paying attention? The truth is, habits don't vanish. They lurk, waiting for weakness. But the difference now was that I could recognize them in real time. I could spot the tremor of FOMO before it turned into a click. I could catch the urge to revenge trade before it swallowed me whole. The drill had rewired not just my trades, but my relationship with myself. It's a strange thing when the decoder disappears. You feel both liberated and exposed. There's no more safety net, no ritual to fall back on. Only you, the chart, and the choices you make. But that's the point. The drill was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to break me open, to build a new reflex, and then to step aside. And as I stared at the screen that day, watching the candles dance, I felt a calm I hadn't known before. The mirror was gone, but I could still see clearly. Little did I know, this clarity was setting the stage for the final lessons. The raw truth about what this journey had really given me and what it had cost. Chapter 10, The Complete Analysis. When the dust settled, I began to see the opposite trade drill for what it really was. Not a magic bullet, not a secret system, but a crucible. It had burned away illusions and left behind raw lessons, sharp and permanent. And as I looked back, both the pros and cons became undeniable. The pros were life-changing. First was discipline. Before the drill, I thought I was disciplined because I had rules written down in a notebook I never opened. But rules on paper mean nothing when fear and greed flood your body. Discipline isn't what you say, it's what you do when everything in you wants to disobey. The drill forced me to obey a rule that made no sense, to act against every instinct, and in doing so, it hardened me. If I could pull the trigger on a trade I hated, then I could certainly wait patiently for the trade I actually wanted. The second was patience. My natural instinct had always been to chase, to click before the candle slipped away. But the decoder showed me that the urge to act immediately was often the very sign I should wait. The drill slowed me down, taught me to breathe, to let the setup unfold instead of rushing headlong into traps. I went from taking 10 trades a day to taking 2. My win rate doubled. The third was detachment, perhaps the most powerful of all. Every trade used to feel personal, a test of my intelligence, a verdict on my worth. Wins inflated me, losses crushed me. But when I flipped trades and detached from their outcomes, I began to see them as experiments, not judgments. The drill stripped the ego out of the equation. I wasn't the hero or the fool. I was just the observer, collecting data. Fun fact, after the drill, my average hold time went from 12 minutes to 3 hours. That's a 15 times increase in patience. Not because I forced myself, but because my rewired instincts finally allowed it. But for every breakthrough, there was an equal measure of risk. The cons were real and painful. First was confusion. Imagine flipping every instinct, only to watch half of those flipped trades lose. The human brain craves certainty, but this drill offers none. It can make you feel like you're trading in a fog where every step might be off a cliff. The second pitfall was misinterpretation. Some traders hear about the drill and think it means always do the opposite of the market. They start shorting every rally, buying every dip blindly, convinced they've cracked a secret code. But that's not the drill. That's just recklessness with extra steps. The exercise isn't about outsmarting the market, it's about outsmarting yourself. The third con was identity erosion. When you flip your trades long enough, you may start to doubt not just your instincts, but yourself. I lived this in the early days, the sense of betrayal, of not knowing who to trust anymore, not even my own judgment. I remember calling a trading buddy and saying, "I don't know what's real anymore." He laughed, thinking I was joking. I wasn't. And then there's the financial cost. Let's be honest, taking opposite trades isn't free. Sometimes the drill costs money, sometimes it costs a lot. I lost about $2,000 in tuition during the learning phase. You pay in red numbers to learn lessons you could never find in a book. I thought of Jesse Livermore, the legendary trader who made and lost fortunes several times over. He once said, "It was never my thinking that made the big money for me. It was always my sitting." Yet even he couldn't escape his own psychology, ending his life in despair after blowing up once again. The market didn't kill him. His own inability to master himself did. That story haunted me, because in Livermore's tragedy, I saw the shadow of every trader's struggle, including mine. But the opposite trade drill gave me something he may have never had, a tool to confront my flaws before they destroyed me. The paradox: the opposite trade drill can either sharpen you into steel or shatter you into pieces. The outcome depends not on the market, but on how you use it. If you treat it as a permanent system, you'll drown. If you treat it as a temporary teacher, you'll grow. Chapter 11. Who's ready for this? Not every trader is ready to face the decoder. In fact, some should stay far away from it. The opposite trade drill is like a fire. It can forge steel, or it can burn you to ash. The outcome depends on who steps into the flames. If you're an impulsive trader, the kind who clicks out of boredom, who chases candles like a dog chasing cars, this drill might just save you. It forces you to confront the chaos of your impulses head on. Each flip trade becomes a slap in the face, a reminder that your instincts are not divine signals, but predictable traps. If you're someone who struggles with patience, who cuts winners too soon and lets losers drag on, the drill shines a spotlight on that weakness. By flipping those instincts, you'll feel the discomfort of holding longer than you want, or stepping out when your ego begs you to stay. Here's a quick test. If you've blown more than one account, if you've felt the sick despair of watching your money evaporate, you might be ready for the drill. Rock bottom has a way of making you willing to try anything, even something as uncomfortable as trading against yourself. But there are traders who should not attempt it, at least not yet. If you lack basic risk management, if you don't know how to set stops or calculate position sizes, the drill will eat you alive. It amplifies mistakes, magnifies weaknesses. Without a safety net, you're not learning. You're just bleeding. And then there are those who are still building confidence. For a new trader who hasn't even learned the basics, flipping every instinct can shatter your belief in yourself before it ever forms. The decoder doesn't coddle. It crushes. And if you don't have a strong foundation, you won't stand back up. There's also the overthinker. If you already second-guess every decision, if analysis paralysis is your demon, the drill might push you over the edge into complete inaction. You need a certain level of decisiveness to flip a trade and live with it. So, who should try it? Traders with enough experience to know their patterns, but enough humility to admit they're flawed. Traders who are tired of bleeding slowly from the same mistakes. Traders who crave truth more than comfort. Traders who can afford to lose some money in exchange for priceless psychological insights. Because the opposite trade drill isn't about making money fast. It's about rewiring your brain. It's about burning away illusions. It's about training yourself to question, to wait, to detach. And for those willing to face the decoder, the rewards go far beyond profit and loss. Chapter 12. Your Mirror Challenge. You've just walked with me through the decoder, 12 chapters of shock, chaos, revelation, and breakthrough. You've seen how the opposite trade drill turned instinct into illusion, illusion into data, and data into transformation. You've seen the complete picture: discipline forged in fire, patience sharpened like a blade, detachment that frees you from ego, but also confusion, discomfort, even identity erosion. So, what's the final verdict? The opposite trade drill works, but not in the way you might expect. It doesn't work as a trading system. It works as a psychological crucible. It burns away weakness. It reveals patterns you can't see otherwise. It prepares you to face the market not with blind instinct, but with awareness. Would I recommend it? Yes, but only to those who are ready to suffer a little, to see themselves without filters. This isn't for the faint of heart. It's for traders who are tired of repeating the same mistakes, who are ready to confront the truth that their biggest enemy isn't the market, it's them. Let me be crystal clear. If you're looking for a get-rich-quick scheme, this isn't it. If you want a comfortable path to profits, look elsewhere. But if you want to understand why you keep sabotaging yourself, if you want to break the cycle of the same mistakes, if you want to finally see your psychological blind spots, then the drill might be exactly what you need. Here's the truth nobody tells you. Most traders spend years fighting the market when they should be studying themselves. The opposite trade drill shortcuts that process. It forces the confrontation, it accelerates the learning. What might take a decade to discover through painful losses, the drill can reveal in 20 trades. Now the lens turns to you. What would happen if you tried it? Not in theory, not in your imagination, but on the screen where your trades live and breathe. 5 trades. That's all it takes to begin. Flip your instinct, log the results. Write down not just what the market does, but what you feel. Your fear, your frustration, your relief, your surprise. Because the decoder doesn't just show numbers, it shows you. And here's where community matters. Share your story. Drop a comment below with your biggest trading demon. Is it FOMO that costs you, revenge trading that spirals out of control, early exits that leave money on the table? When you name it, you begin to tame it. And when you share it, you help someone else realize they're not alone in this struggle. But I want to go deeper. If you're serious about transformation, here's what I propose. Document your 5 opposite trades and tag me. Show me your data. Share your revelations. Let's build a community of traders who aren't afraid to look in the decoder, who understand that the path to consistency isn't through more indicators or better strategies, but through psychological mastery. If you try it, don't do it for profit. Do it for perspective. Do it for the clarity that comes when the decoder shows you your flaws in painful detail. Because once you've seen them, you can't go back. And that's the gift. Remember, this isn't about money, not yet. It's about perspective. The market will always be uncertain, but you don't have to be. The drill is just one tool, one lens, one teacher. The real transformation happens when you decide to confront your own psychology head-on, without excuses, without hiding behind complexity. If this resonated with you, if you felt that uncomfortable recognition of your own patterns in my story, subscribe to Trading Psychology Stick. Every week, we dive deep into the mental game of trading, the part nobody talks about at parties, the part that actually determines whether you survive or thrive in these markets. So, here's the close, the one line I want you to carry with you. The market isn't your enemy. Your instincts are. And the moment you dare to face them in the decoder, you stop being prey and start becoming a trader who can finally see clearly. The question isn't whether the drill will work for you. The question is, are you brave enough to find out? Your move.